So welcome back everybody, this is Paul again, and today I'm going to continue my series talking about some of the different scenarios that we might be facing in the years ahead. And a lot of us in the West, we live in a pretty comfortable life, and we have a lot of security around us and nice buildings and no wars and maybe a little crime now and then, but maybe a storm now and then. And we forget that actually our whole civilization has some very precarious legs that it stands on. And just a reminder, if you travel, you go to a place like Italy, there's a place where they have preserved people who were involved in a volcano and the ash just settled on them, and they were maybe in the middle of baking bread or giving each other a hug or just boom, I mean, that's it, over. And there's been a lot of different situations like that over the centuries, examples of how, in a very, very short period of time, what we think as being a secure, steady life just changes dramatically. Now, again, most of us, at least me, I never had an experience of something like that. I never had an earthquake or landslide or anything like that. The worst thing I've ever experienced is maybe a power outage for a few days, 4 days. But the fact is that there are already, just if you look, let's say, okay, the last, say my life is 60 years. In the last 60 years, if you look at what possible scenarios have happened all around the world, and you add them up, there's got to be at least one a year, at least. There's that tsunami that killed us about 10 years ago. I mean, then we had the thing in Fukushima. I mean, just imagine, for example, if half of California became unlivable because of radiation. Just think about that. Let's say the northern half of California had a radiation leak from a nuclear facility and so on. I mean, because it's far away, we don't think, we don't think it affects us. But right now, Fukushima is polluting the whole ocean, and lots of fish are dying, and there's dead spots in the ocean and so on. We're just sitting about, we don't think about it. So I urge people to be prepared because, I mean, a lot of people make fun of so-called preppers. Okay, what are you prepping for? Well, I'll tell you what, it just makes plain common sense. It is just the way to be. For centuries and centuries, human beings, okay, we got to store up food for the winter. We got to save water for the dry times. We got to save our seeds for the future. We've got to be prepared. It's just normal living. The idea that, some communities are saying, well, you can't be a prepper, you can't go live on your land, you can't get off the grid. I mean, that's kind of tyranny. That's like saying you can't take care of yourself. So if the government can't take care of us in an emergency, they've already proven that. They can't even take care of a lot of other really important things. They're not going to come and take care of me. So I think it's just very prudent to be prepared. And what to be prepared for? So I'm going to start talking about, there's a lot of different scenarios. And one is that, power supplies can go out for a whole bunch of different reasons. And I get into that in some of the other things. But let's talk about natural disasters. Just natural disasters. Let's say, for example, all up and down the East Coast, we have all kinds of cities and all kinds of very important ports and so on going on. And the whole coast of Florida is extremely really flat, and there's also areas along the Carolinas that have these outer islands. Now, a lot of people don't realize that on the west coast of Africa, there's an area, I think it's the Canary Islands, and there's a volcanic island over there that has a history. And it has a huge fissure and a huge cracks in it, and the water accumulates there in the rain, and then it can go down and meet with the volcanic material, lava coming up from within. And one day they're expecting that one day possibly then that thing is going to explode, and the whole side of the island, the mountainous side, is going to just roll off into the ocean on the west side. And if that ever happens, or when that it finally does happen, it's going to send a tsunami that hits the entire east coast of the United States, and it will be a really, really big one. It won't be 2 or 3 feet. It'll be big, big, wiping out cities, whole cities, maybe even go 10 miles inland. Now, will that happen? We don't know. Could happen anytime. Could happen tomorrow. Now, there's a lot of different things like that that can happen, unfortunately. Now, if you add up, okay, so what are the odds? Okay, Yellowstone could blow, and Yellowstone is way overdue, according to scientists. If Yellowstone blows, it did in the past, and they found 1.5 feet of volcanic ash hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of miles away, 1,500 miles, I think it was, away from the source. So, stuff happens. And all I try to say is, look, you know, we live in vulnerable times, and there's a lot of political instability as well. So, regardless of the system, say the bank system, which is all man-made, and all the infrastructure and a lot of other things, the natural disasters that could occur. Another, for example, I talk about in another episode, would be about the solar flares. If the solar flare goes off, and we had one recently, if it were to head toward the Earth, it could actually just blow out all our satellites, our navigation, our financial exchange systems, and it could really like blow out literally the electronics in cars and automobiles and airplanes and so on, because they're not protected. Some are and some not, but most aren't. And next thing you know, we're back into firewood, candles. So, I suggest that people say, well, look, okay, if a power outage came for 2 weeks, could I survive? It seems to me it's just prudent to be able to survive for a whole month. I mean, there's been many, many earthquake scenarios that have happened in recent years. And people who had some preparedness did a lot better. And one of the things to prepare for, if you live in an earthquake zone, you might consider moving. Same way with along the coastlines. I remember reading a report one time that said around 1,200 years ago, it wasn't that long ago, 1,200 years, they found evidence that a tsunami hit New Jersey, and I think they said it was 12 miles inland. Can you imagine a tsunami going 12 miles all the way in, and how many suburbs would it wipe out? And the transportation systems that we have, for example, in a major city, if a power outage happened in a major city like New York City, there's only a certain number of ways to get out of the city. I mean, there's bridges and they're all going to be tangled up, and tunnels, and if there was an earthquake under New York City, it would be like the end of the tunnel system. And all the sewer and everything's down there. So, I don't really want to be an alarmist. I just want people to be prudent, because we don't really know. Now, for example, here's another example of something could happen. Over, I think it was Siberia, and there's been a number of cases of this, where all of a sudden, like, thousands of caribou or wild animals just froze, because something happened in the Earth's atmosphere through the distortion of the magnetic field or whatever, that allowed the cold air from upper space to come down and instantly freeze animals, kill them. Boom. I mean, and then there's, for example, plagues of various kinds of natural plagues as the earth warms up and different kinds of bacteria are released in the soil and so on. You can have, like, there's been all kinds of birds falling out of the sky, and animals, sharks or fisheries having problems, or so. Again, I don't want to be alarmist. I'm going to make a number of videos, but I think people should prepare for power outages, and just as a matter of prudence, have some food in their home, so that, like, okay, at least you don't have to panic if some basic catastrophe happens, an earthquake nearby and the bridge is broken or whatever. You can survive for a little while until people can kind of get together and solve and rescue and so on. Now, there's a lot of specific things, like I said, that could happen. One of the things that is going on right now is in certain areas of the world, we know that the ground is warming. And, you know, we talk about CO2, but methane is getting released from the soil, and there's been places up in Russia where, you know, methane blew out and it made an immediate hole hundreds of feet in diameter that just blew out an explosion of methane into the atmosphere. I mean, you can imagine living. Fortunately, that's way over there in Siberia. So, a crisis that happens in another part of the world can really affect us. And those of us who live in an area where it seems to be pretty stable, I mean, there are definitely places in the world that seem to be more stable than others as far as the weather and geological things that happen. Might do a little research and find out, hey, well, maybe I should be a little inland and maybe up a little higher in altitude. And there's another area that I want to get into, probably in another video, is about astronomical occurrences. Like for thousands and thousands of years, people watch the sky. And why? Because like maybe one day, long time ago, all of a sudden something fell out of the sky, like an asteroid, or exploded above, like Tunguska, or just something happened. And from then I say, holy cow! From that point of the sky, you know, these things come. So we better start paying attention. And right now we still keep track of things like the meteor showers, and we're still trying to scan the sky and see if there's any rogue asteroids, you know, comets hanging around out there. It might just suddenly, whoa, we didn't see that coming. I mean, every day, every week it seems like they're announcing, well, you know, we just found that there was an asteroid. We hadn't seen it, but it was only 20,000 miles away or 200,000 miles away. So, okay, well, we missed that one. But there's craters all over the planet. And you say, well, something really big hit there. And, you know, we live in a very sheltered world. We go about our lives, especially in the West. We don't look up in the sky. We don't pay attention to, I mean, how many people get up in the morning and say, okay, I'm going to check the solar weather today, see if there's any flares. I'm going to check the magnetic field shift. I'm going to check the temperatures of the waters. Are we going to get any icebergs melting? Or is Greenland going to like get de-iced all of a sudden? Or is Antarctica going to melt? I mean, do people do that? I mean, there are literally so many possibilities. Now, fortunately, because of the internet, we have like you know, all kinds of interesting people out there watching these cameras, and they're watching Yellowstone, they're watching Hawaii, and Costa Rica's got volcanoes. I mean, there's people out there checking the water temperatures and making comments, and I'm just one of the voices trying to coordinate and give some information. It's important information about dangers is valuable. And, you know, there was an example of somebody in the old days. He had like a train had a caboose at the end, and on the top of the caboose there was like windows that were a little bit wider than the train, or a little top on the top where they could sit and look, because there are always these people looking out for the different. The engineer had their focus on the front and what's there, and the people in the caboose are saying, okay, what are the other dangers here? The environment around the train. And, you know, there are a lot of us out there right now just trying to say, look, you know, I'm just trying to give you some background information, go about your life, but be prepared, because, you know, we are in very skittish times right here, and I think it should be pretty much obvious to everybody. But I'll make another video, and thanks again for listening.